So, Tim, we've been talking about creating a more empowered environment with a servant leader mindset. And we've also talked about accountability. But with accountability comes the question of, are we focused on strategy? Are we focused on tactics? Is it a little bit of both? And I know in your workshops and in your coaching practice, you advocate that there's a huge opportunity for leaders to create more impact by really elevating and being more strategic in terms of their focus as a leader. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How do we get there?
It's a great question, Dan. I think it's a huge opportunity for all of us, especially those marketing leaders, whether you're seasoned or aspiring. There is this gap, what I call the strategic gap, and you have tactics and you have strategy. And we want to be strategic, but we need to be tactical. And that's the problem. That's the dilemma, is how much of our time should we be strategic and how much should we be tactical? And most people spend very little time being strategic. Most of the leaders that I coach are often not being strategic at all. And it's a huge missed opportunity. But often, if you think about like a groundhog on Groundhog's Day, we pop up, we look around, we're strategic for a moment, and then we go back down, put our heads down, and get to work. And that's not good either, because we're being strategic for an instant, but we need to be strategic consistently. And so I believe there's a couple ways that we can become more strategic consistently. One of these is just knowing what your week looks like. And I call it the weekly workflow, so we can be focused every week on the things that actually matter. And it's funny because I had a conversation with a new client recently, and he said, well, every week there's many priorities. How do I focus on just one? And I said, well, every week there should be one priority. And in fact, the word priority, when it was first invented, was singular. There was no such thing as priorities. If you look at the etymology here, there was only one priority. And it was the thing that comes before everything else. And so I believe that every week we have one thing that comes before everything else. And if you can really figure that out, and if that's tied to your objectives, your outcomes, the impact you're trying to create, then you can focus on that. And you get your team rallied around that. And you can actually make progress on that thing, no surprise, when you focus on it. So I believe that's just one way that we can be more strategic. But I think another really powerful way is to have what I call the 30-second scorecard, which is a board, if you will. I think of a baseball game. I'm not a fan of baseball, but they have this big board and it has all the key information you need to know about the game and the score and what's happening. So if you come to the game late, halfway through, the board tells you what's happened, what the current situation is, and how the game is progressing. And I think we need that for organizations. You probably have KPIs or OKRs or things like that, but I think the outcomes, the impact that we're talking about here can be measured in the same way. And having a way to point to it and make it manifest so everyone knows what's happening and are we progressing towards that is so important and so critical. So those are just a couple ways. There's more, but I think the idea is we need to be more strategic more often. And we can't always be strategic. But if we're not spending enough time being strategic, then we're missing the forest for the trees, and we really need to get our head out of the water.
Yeah, I talk with so many marketing leaders that talk about a common challenge, which is their calendar and their time seems to be slipping outside of their proactive control. And the way that happens, of course, is the preponderance of meetings and conversations, right? So others are initiating, they're intruding into their calendar, they're grabbing time. And I know something that you've talked about is to counter that is to be proactive and go and grab dedicated time that is really an investment in yourself, to be more strategic thinking time so that you can avoid the issue of saying, I want to be more strategic, I want to find time to think, and everyone else has grabbed all of the available hours. So how do I stem that?
It's so true. Yes, I will be very clear here. Meetings are a complete waste of time. And I think some people disagree with me. Some people think there's times to meet, perhaps. But meetings on the whole are a complete waste of time. And the days that I have 7, 8 meetings, I'm exhausted. I can't get anything done. But the days when I have no meetings are amazing. I'm so productive. And I think there's a seesaw between meetings and productivity. I think they are mutually exclusive. And if you believe that, then to your point, it means we need to eliminate as many meetings as possible. There's this transition that's happened, and it's been interesting to see. Companies were in office, and then they became remote. But very few companies have gone from remote to asynchronous. I think there's a difference between being remote and being asynchronous. Remote means you're working together from different places. Asynchronous means you're working independently from different places. And I think that distinction is so important and so profound that if you're able to create an environment where people can work asynchronously, We can communicate and collaborate effectively without having to be on the same page, in the same room, virtually or in person at the same time. And so I think time management is a huge problem for leaders because we have so much dumped on us. And absolutely, I encourage everybody to block off strategic time, whether it's strategic time to think or to get the right things done or to process everything that's going on. We all need that strategic time. And if you don't protect your time, if you don't take the time and hoard it for yourself, someone else will if you're not careful. And I think that is a huge opportunity that we can all investigate of where's your time really being spent? And you can't be strategic if you don't have the time to be strategic. That's step one.
Yeah, I think the other thing when it comes to meetings in terms of how to get the most meaningful outcomes begins with just a philosophy around how do we want the dynamic, in the meeting to be. And so often we see meetings are about a purpose of one person wanting to communicate information out, as opposed to viewing it as a listening and learning opportunity, which is more engaging through the act of really asking questions, stimulating conversation, actually encouraging divergent points of view. And almost sometimes that can create kind of a little bit of a healthy tension, but that's actually good, to be able to get to the best decision. And the best outcome is by considering and really actively promoting divergent viewpoints and discourse. And so often, I think, shy away from that into the standard form of come and let's power through some PowerPoint slides, and we'll have one speaker, and then I'll communicate, you absorb, and then we'll move on to the next meeting. And it's a missed opportunity to create meaningful connection. And so if we think about making each of those moments precious in the form of what do we really want to get from them, then maybe we'll have fewer of them, but the ones that we have will have more lasting and true and meaningful impact.
Yeah, Dan, I love this so much because we often, at least I think of impact externally, the impact that we can create as an organization, the impact that we'll have on the world, the impact that we're, shaping our market. But you're right, you're describing the impact internally that, as a leader we can have on our team and also as a team member that you can have on the team if you are able to speak up, if you're able to share a different point of view, if you're able to create change because of your perspective and your ideas. And I don't talk about this a lot, but there's this idea that I have called the magic memo. And I think we've lost this idea of the memo. Again, this is from the olden days. It's not a new idea, but back in the olden days, for people who don't remember, you would send a memo out, and the memo would have some information that you wanted to distribute to people. And now we have collaborative tools, and it's really fascinating to see if you take this idea of a memo and you write up, what are we thinking? What are we going to do? What's our plan? Who needs to be involved? What are some potential risks that are involved? What are the questions, if you will, the FAQs? What are some things we should be thinking about? And you share this memo with the team. And I'm talking about everybody you possibly can who's relevant, not just the team who's going to work on it, and allow people to comment, to contribute. It does a couple things. One, it brings awareness to the conversation, so everyone's in the loop. And there's no longer these separate meetings happening in isolation of, did you hear about this or what decision was made? But two, you get this divergent group of perspectives of people saying, what about this? Or have you thought about this? Or we're actually doing something similar here. And you can allow people to ask questions or add risks or potential issues to this document. And now it becomes this like super valuable place for everybody to be aligned and to have written it down so anybody can go and reference it and read it. Not a meeting that I missed, that I was out sick last Tuesday and now I missed the meeting and please catch me up, but a document that is a historical reference document and also a living document that you can add and expand to. I think this idea is so simple, but so incredibly effective that it just brings people together, allows that conversation to happen, and prevents this isolation. And as a result, then amplifies the impact that every team member can have because now their voice can be heard and they're in the loop and they're on the same page. I think it's a simple idea that everybody should give a try at least, because I've found with my experience and with my clients that it helps tremendously, even on a small team, but especially on larger teams.
Yeah, it's creating the ultimate shelf life from those moments that we all know, the magic moments that happen in a meeting,
Yes.
and then they're there for an instant, and then sometimes then we move on and they're gone. Well, now we're creating a shelf life for those magic, meaningful moments.